Welcome to tomorrow's Best Practices Today. I'm Clark Newby, and today we're joined by a triple threat in Mark Ogne. Mark's Chief Marketing Officer and AI Officer of Kompetently with a K, where they're launching a talent intelligence platform that's focused on AI-driven competency assessments, personalized learning pathways, and organizational workforce optimization. I can't wait to dig in on all of that. But wait, there's more. Mark's also founder and CEO of Simplexity AI. They help you simplify the perceived complexities and risk of AI adoption for B2B sales and marketing teams. Sounds like a very applicable bunch of folks to be talking to us. And thirdly, he's founder and CEO of the ABM Consortium, which has been for a dozen years now, I believe, focused on emerging B2B marketing best practices. So all along. So this new crossing of the AI beam with the ABM and the campaign design and marketing strategy beam. It's going to be a fascinating intersection, I think, for us to talk about today. So welcome, Mark. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Well, thank you, Clark. It's great to be here.
Now, clearly, you have, I just talked about the last dozen years in that brief intro, but you've had a crazy career history. You've spanned many different industries, verticals, technologies. How does a guy kind of build a career path like that? What piques your interest in each of these endeavors that you've not just participated in, but founded, but started yourself? What's the mechanism that has driven you throughout this career and throughout all these twists and turns?
I think it's learning. I love to learn new things. And even before marketing, right out of college, I was in sales and then, large account selling. Biggest deal I've ever closed is a $400 million annual deal. From there, I became an operating executive and built a $350 million ARR business in e-commerce. And at that point, that was kind of the .com and internet digital days, and moved into marketing. But I think the span across all that is, I'm just tireless at wanting to find new things, learn them, and build, I call it a tool belt. And, use that old analogy of if all you have is a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail. And there's a lot of people that have just built hammers in their career, which may be fine if you're, an attorney specialized in one type of practice. But in this B2B world, it changes so much. I think it's a real valuable thing to have that T-shaped person of understanding all the different levers and functions that are around you.
Well, and also if you build a hammer, you get very vested in driving things with it, right? We're kind of in this shoulder area right now where there are new AI technologies and solution organizations are building AI into their offerings, and there's going to be turf wars. There's going to be the settling out of a little bit of, I think, back to the suite versus point solutions work, approach to building your tech stack while we're going through all that. But it's interesting. There's always, I think, obviously, particularly in B2B, in technology markets like this, there's always a new thing to be evaluated and to be, perhaps a set of decisions that need to be made. But there are the tools and there's the capability, and then there's how we do things. And obviously, a lot of your work is not just about the technology, but how folks take it on, how folks learn themselves once you've learned and are sharing it with them, and how it might change the way they do things. Talk to me a little bit about the soft side of all of that.
Just to change one word, how and why. So the how tends to be the technology and the processes, and the why is the strategy and approach. Why does your company appeal to one market better than another, or better than one competitor or another? And what I would say here is AI is one of its longer term changes that people aren't really contemplating yet is that it's going to commoditize the how. But fundamentally, what still exists is the why, the human aspect of that. So it's the architecture, it's the objectives, it's the product, side of why are we building this for who? Those things still exist. But transferring this now to the next stage, I think the next stage, in with regard to like your question of software, I question really whether software and SaaS as we know it today will exist.
Mhm.
I mean, I can foresee an AI operating system that, maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's 10 years, but it's not 50 years, where a person who really understands the why from a marketing perspective could be instructing a series of agents, like, hey, I want to build a campaign. I think thematically it's this topic. Go off and draft a white paper on the topic, spin out three emails that we can use in a cadence to solicit it, 10 social posts that we can put up. And what we're going to do is segment this audience, and for these reasons. And,
Mhm.
30 minutes later, the whole thing comes back to you. Done. And I mean, I'm already building components of that today, not connecting them automatically,
Mhm.
but being able to say, do this and it'll come back with that. Do this other thing, it'll come back with it. So it's like a half a step away from literally automating the entire process. And, you know, those who are in operational how roles would be really well served right now, not just to pick up AI, but to really lean in on the why. So it's not about efficiency anymore. In fact, just to take a step half back,
Yeah.
AI is about effectiveness. It's not about efficiency. If you think about it from an efficiency standpoint, you're just going to build more crap faster.
Yeah. You'll get
So,
anywhere. You'll get the same destination faster, whether it was a good one or not, an optimal one or not, right?
so focus on effectiveness is the key thing that most, air quotes, experts get wrong. And they want to talk about efficiency. So focus on the effectiveness side of things, which is largely around the why. The AI then you can employ to build the efficiency side of that, which is the doing or the how. And I think that is really a key aspect of where I've been focusing on, but I think that those who are coming up in their career need to focus on. It's like software engineering, what we do in B2B sales and marketing. The door is open. It's not going to close. Everything's going to change. And, at the direction level of what we see right now, I think the advice of really understanding the why and starting to shift into that direction is going to keep you ahead of the game.
Yeah, and I think we like I think we're telling ourselves at least right now that in some ways maybe not only a human, but that's the X factor, right? For the continued human driving and input with AI. AI may wind up automating 90, more and more and more of the process of the how for sure. Some of the why, I think, as well as it learns, as it tunes, etc. What do you think of as the secret sauce of the human part of the why that still that's still required to keep this about effectiveness versus efficiency? Or is there a uniquely human secret sauce that's required? Will that eventually require us to think differently about our role in in marketing and go to market specifically, but in working with AI in general?
So I think that's a really great question. And it's interesting because right now we're at a point and the possible ramifications of where it can go is really wide.
Hmm.
So going back to where I was a second ago about focus on the why, um, you know, understand how to offload the how and, build AI around as I like to think of it more. more as a tool like Iron Man. Like AI, we're not trying to build a Superman who is, extraterrestrial type of a,
A strange visitor
super.
from another planet.
Exactly, exactly. But I think of AI more like an Iron Man suit, where it can help me do things that are certainly kind of superhuman and protective, and you know enable me to do more and better things faster. Um, so think about it from that perspective and find the ways that you can start to use it to help you do better things. It will naturally help you do things faster. Um, but what's interesting for, comparing age, but I mean, for the age I'm at, I mean, I've literally rewired my brain around using tool sets that we're building at both Kompetently and at Simplexity. It's kind of like how, you might have rewired your brain when you started using a computer, a PC, right? It wasn't just a new tool. It actually physically changed and mentally changed how you approached your work. And I think AI is very parallel to, first looking at it as saying like, a DOS prompt on a PC. I looked at that and people said everybody's going to have one of these on their desk soon. I'm like, oh, no way. Like, it's too hard. It's like nobody's going to, and then all of a sudden there's Windows and, the Mac operating system. And all of a sudden this processing power became something that even my parents could learn how to
Right.
use and become adept at it. And I think that's a real parallel to where AI is going. And right now, a lot of the discussion is, no, I'm going to do a spreadsheet on, paper,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's the parallel to arguing that back in the late 80s and early 90s to saying like, AI just hallucinates, so I'm going to push back on it and not use it.
Right.
And it's a parallel.
Yeah, I love that parallel because I think, you think about those of us that can think back that far that were around, or the rest of you can Google it up. Those early PC days, those early applications, there were killer apps, right? And the spreadsheet was one of them, Lotus 1, 2,
Yeah.
3, even before
Yeah.
Excel. Um, and, they'll tell you, oh, you can even have a computer in your home to store all your recipes. Yeah, all these
Yeah.
crazy, very point solution, like maybe kind of audience driven. I think point solution, point solution applications. We're definitely it's the old three blind men and an elephant, right? We're all feeling around, I think, for this, what AI is going to be, and it kind of feels like a snake if you grab the trunk, kind of feels like a tree if you grab the leg, but this elephant is going to have a huge amount of power behind it. So when you're working with clients, how do they what's the typical response if there is one, and how do you kind of open up this universe to them? Does it take a long time? Where do they start? How do you bring this to each of your different clients and each of their different stages, challenges, etc.?
So in the companies that I'm working with, Competently and Simplexity, what we're trying to do is to wrap the technology around a person rather than the person around the technology. So it should be easy to use. An example here that, certainly everybody in your audience would understand is with Simplexity. If you look at AI in general, okay, it is 100 miles wide and 1 mile deep. It can tell you about quantum physics and, driving a garbage truck, but it really can't tell you the nuances about Leadtail and how you're different than a competitor and for this persona, and you're better with these types of programs and these, like it doesn't understand that well enough. It's a mile deep. But commercially, what we need is that thing tilted up on its side. We need something that's only a mile wide, but 100 miles deep. And when you have that, then you don't have to do prompt engineering. You don't have to try to force the tool to do something that it's not built to do. And so the thing that I have been focused on is creating very purpose-driven LLMs, custom or CLMs, custom language models, so that you can push a button or just converse by typing, or voice, but converse with the tool and just say, I'm interested in this. I'm thinking about that. What happens if this changes? And what is the impact of that persona? You just communicate with it, and it's trained on your entire universe. It understands everything about what you're trying to talk to it about. So it's level set of what it's trying to, you're trying to jog it into isn't from the 100 miles wide. Is this person talking about quantum mechanics and quarks and neutrinos, or are they talking about planting seeds in the desert? Like, it's saying like, okay, wait a minute, we're going to talk about this, and I get it. And so the interaction is very, very different. And it's almost like we have to untrain people to start to use tools like this. It should be as easy and competently to set up an ideal role profile by uploading a job description and clicking a couple of buttons, and then it does the work that would have taken you a week to do in 28 seconds. How can it do that? Because behind it, there's like 120,000 rows of code in a corpus of data that understands more about all of these topics of competency assessments and talent, intelligence, and roles than anybody that walks the planet today. It's a composition of everybody's understanding of that topic. Same is true with Simplexity, but what we do is we custom train it. We reverse engineer the go-to-market strategy for a company. Now, just a side note here that's really interesting is that when we do this, we can literally download an entire website 5 levels deep with one click. We get that information. We go through 5 different steps in a custom language model where it's audiences and capabilities and functionalities and marketing messages and market positioning. And what we find that's really interesting is even if somebody is unable to create interesting content, the nuggets of what they need are kind of spread throughout their website, and we could find it. And then we could recompose it so we could understand, what does this capability mean relative to that persona in that industry?
So in spite of themselves, if they can't communicate it well,
we can still get it.
Gotten it at least in the mix, you can pull it out and create that narrative, create that those relationships, etc.
But I think the success is going to be around, how do you get really super knowledgeable solutions that relieve the pressure from the person using it to have to conform to the tool?
Interesting. Yeah.
And
say more.
Right. And right now the friction is that most money that flows into these companies, they want to see a subscription model. So, you end up with tools that write content, and you can upload a couple of documents to help train it, and there's no services component to it. But what you get from it is a 20 or 30% better idea, not a 90% better idea. The gap there is in the tens of thousands of rows of code that needs to be written to decompose in a granular level the strategy for that company, their audiences, their capabilities and functionalities, their key messages, and all. Like, when you decompose that, then it makes everything else after that. So that as a services component to get started, it makes everything after that super easy, highly efficient. But what we solved for initially was effectiveness.
Right. I think of the Star Trek transporters. Breaks everything down to its like its subatomic level, and then once you have that, you can recompose it even into a more powerful go-to-market strategy and communication platform.
I wanted to expand on that for just a second, because what's really become a very unique perspective of mine is, once we create that corpus of data, we then have to data map. So what we're doing is we're asking, the way that we constructed the data, there's a lot of IP around that, but we can start to ask it questions to say, like, okay, with this audience and that capability, two different elements of what we trained it on, but we're getting it to understand now how to connect, like, the synapse of all these elements here. And I tell you, it is really, I mean, so I've known people who have had like really bad concussions and seen a neurologist. The neurologist says, yeah, it's going to take a while for your brain to remap itself. It's a direct parallel to that. It's almost exciting to see the tool once you have the data presented in there and it vectorizes it and things like that, to start asking questions that force it to connect synapses, and all of a sudden it gets it. And like, that is really freaking cool. Now, I'm like at a top 1% of people to understand that type of thing. But when we do it, I mean, it's like, it gives me a chill down my spine. It's like, wow, that's so freaking cool. Like it's literally learning and connecting ideas. And when you do that, I, you know, one of the hard parts about all of these topics is that the human mind could only comprehend 2 or 3 dimensions of analysis at one time. Two, or like smart people, 3. Like the AI can do several thousand simultaneously. So it's looking across all those synapses and saying, what are the connections? Which ones are the strongest? Which ones are most valuable that relate to what the person's talking about and what I know? And it gives you the answers back. And it has just gone through in a matter of 30 seconds, thousands and thousands of potential combinations and aggregated them properly. That's the magic of AI.
And how do your clients, when they see this, first of all, I'm sure there's a visceral sort of like, wow, sort of response. Are they, with your guidance, how do they, you said you kind of have to reset yourself. So once you see what the AI can actually do, you need to reset how you're thinking about the problem and how you're thinking about the strategy. A lot of people, we talk about hammers, everything looks like a nail, right? A lot of people came through their whole careers thinking a particular way about how these problems are wrestled to the ground. And by the way, a big part of that wrestling is that I'm such a smart dude and I've seen a lot. And, I've got a little extra I'm going to sprinkle on this one. We're going to try it change. There's a lot that's inside, I would imagine, a client's sort of point of view and identity when they start seeing this. How do they, how often is that a challenge for you in working with them? How do you work through that?
One of the things that when we're doing that data mapping, I'll have it on the back side of the system. I can have it put together a downloadable spreadsheet of the mapping. So let's say there's 10 personas and 47 capabilities, and say,
Yeah.
okay, for each cell that intersects, give me a 1 sentence statement of value that capability provides that persona. It'll do it in 35 seconds. And then I put like another 3 minutes into formatting it and make it look pretty. But when I
The
show that to a
font in
client,
bold and italics. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
right.
I've literally seen a tear come out of somebody's eye when they see that. Because if you stop and think about what it's doing, it's aligning product capabilities with personas and differentiating. Every cell is a different calculation of looking at what is the value to Clark for this. And it's like the marketer looks at that intuitively, would say that would take me at least a week or longer to finish
Oh
that.
yeah. With the background to actually even know how to solve the problem, even know where to
Right.
look, even know what was bullshit and what was true and what was still true, what's no
Yeah.
longer, what's uh, you know been overwritten, all the rest, right? Yeah.
Right. Right.
So how do they? So in a world where we have a super agent or a set of agents that are able to do this, um, we kind of going back to the teaching kids to code sort of dynamic. A big part of a career path in business is experience. Is your experience? Where have you been? What have you done, etc. When AI can kind of obviate all of that out, how do you how would you advise folks that are early in their career to live and thrive in this world? Because the executive, I mean, like you say, for the decision makers, this is only good news, right? It's faster, it's more effective, maybe it's fewer, you know, people that have to manage, et cetera, cost, et cetera, et cetera. But how do people craft their career paths to get up to those positions now?
You know, I've actually written a few articles now on Martech talking about this. And I think this is, the proper thing. This is the perfect question to be asking is how do you look around that corner a little bit further? And my resolution is largely driven by my, now deep exposure into competently and competencies and skills and understanding these things and using as an example, like software engineering, as an example. You need people that know how to that have the mental and emotional agility to keep pace with change, have the communication skills to be really effective in stressful situations, collaboration skills that can pull people together and come up with ideas, and just I've had this conversation with my son who's in high school right now. Like I would have told him a year ago, study computer software engineering. Today, I'm loading LM Studio onto his gaming computer and teaching him how to download, open source models onto his computer and play with them. And what it's going to be about is taking a half step back again. If this were just about training people on AI, it'd be a catastrophe. Because, again, one of those articles I wrote for Martech, I looked at a Pew Research project, and it was like 11,000 respondents across the U.S. And the ability for people to say that they were receptive to AI is unfortunately really heavily skewed by gender and by race. Heavily skewed. And so if all you like men, white and Asian are like off the charts, and the point isn't like one's good or one's bad. The point is that as an organization is it to sound the yellow flag, to raise it, to say, wait a minute, everybody take a stop here. This isn't about, going to an AI symposium and teaching everybody how to use it. There are soft skills that are driving the negative responses by a majority of people in your workforce today that you need to first address. There's resistance to change. Which AI is just another element of change. But there's been so much change culturally in the last half or quarter century, more so than all of the prior century. So all the management philosophies, all the HR's training and skill philosophies that we've had are in the midst of changing. If you just look at like even the last 4 years, a global pandemic, like holy cow, working from home, like everything has changed. And AI, in a sense, is just another one of those big elements of change, and people are pushing back on that.
These changes. So maybe going. Let's bring this down. Let's get down to the details a little bit as folks are moving their way through the steps. We're talking about these tectonic plates moving around, but we still have to walk through our lives. So the steps that you're thinking of, how do you choose? I mean, I know you. I think you have a take, right, from our conversations of you're building a custom language. Is it better to start with custom GPTs? What do you think about the solutions that are out there? Is it good to start with one of those because there's some support and some community around them? Or what are the stepping stones
Yeah.
for folks, whether they're a student in high school or somebody in the middle of their career, to think about these GPTs and how to get started and how to move forward?
So the correct answer is to realize that, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever model you're talking about, fundamentally it's a consumer tool that sits on top of an enterprise application. So when people start to talk about AI and they're talking about the consumer front end tools, they need to first open the curtain and look behind, and the Wizard of Oz actually has, a billion other things that you can do. So the right answer is somebody needs to be knowledgeable enough to get you involved in an environment where all the constraints of the consumer tool are lifted. And so context window, the ability to communicate, the amount of throughput is all very much managed tightly in the consumer facing tools. Now, if you want to ask it single dimension questions, like I just went through a project of onboarding some client data, I realized there's all kinds of charts in this academic paper that I was working on that had more information that was outside of just the text itself. So I was using ChatGPT. I'd load it up there and say, analyze this in the context of this type of an environment, and focus on these 5 things in your output. It would read the entire chart. Like, it's really wickedly good at doing single dimension stuff. And it'll blow my mind every time I do that. So simply, like, if you're trying to, read an analyst report, hey, you could take the text, and read that and understand it, but then grab the charts, pop them into ChatGPT, and tell explicitly analyze it from this perspective and give me these 5 types of outputs from it. And you could paste it back into the text that you have. You have something now that's far more valuable than you did before. The custom GPTs, I think, are really good as a point of starting and learning how you can affect the way that it thinks. Because you can, I 100% both these organizations, we are directing how the AI works, programming it to do stuff very specifically. That's a whole nother world to get involved with. The custom GPTs are like just a crack of the door. You can kind of see a sliver of light where I can start to affect it some. But there's a whole nother world once you open that door up that's beyond that. That'll
I have
require some
been,
expertise.
yeah, it has blown my mind, even for the commercial available AIs, that the tools, because that did not occur to me at the front end, is you can say, like, give me 5 options or give me a thing, but you can also say things like, and think about it, don't give me your first your first thoughts. Think about it, particularly in context to, maybe what I'm doing right now, and then give me your opinion. Like you would talk to a human, how you would teach someone, like, okay, I know you're a smart kid, but just take a beat and now think from a few other perspectives. And that kind of input into the how the AI is running itself, quote unquote, right? That hadn't even occurred to me. So once then you get into a custom GPT where you really have your hands on all those knobs, and knobs are being probably, I would imagine, generated as you go to further tune. You're right. It's a crack in the door. It's a crack of the door. Going to the top of the organization. What are the top issues you think they should be focusing on, or how do you counsel them, or how do you sort the the challenges and the approaches for them?
So I would say that, to go back to that Pew Research in the article that I'd written, is to understand the native capacity of your organization to absorb AI. Now, if you're working at a very technically competent organization, the answer is probably rather high. If you're working in one that's less, technically focused, probably rather low. So the answer is going to be, initially, for that C-level team, for them to understand, is the organization even functionally capable of absorbing AI? If there's a question mark, then you need to start getting into soft skill training. Like, do they have in soft skills, just like hard skills, are teachable. You can teach people to become, more, open to new ideas, or, feeling more confident and comfortable with that. And the C team leadership is going to play a big role in that. If they're operating with sticks more than carrots, then, you've just created a team that's going to be that lack the agility to try new stuff, right? So you have to start teaching them that carrots are available for trying and learning, failing, succeeding. Like, that's how the organization is going to be successful at adopting AI, is through this agility of soft skills, mental, emotional capacities, things like that. The second is to have a plan. Like, okay, where are we going to use it? How? Why? Why? The big question. What aspects of our organizational strategy are we trying to focus on solving? The big supposition there is that somebody has a well enunciated and conceived organizational strategy, right?
Right.
But
And
it is
not
to
just the
pick,
board saying, why aren't we doing anything with AI?
right. To physically say, hey, we want to, expand in this area or reduce this attrition or do this type of stuff. Like, get to that level of objectives and then start to back into that. So you're starting from, is the team functionally capable of handling this change? Based on our organizational strategy, what elements do we think most value may be applied to? What are the use cases that support that assertion? Let's go try some use cases for this team in that area to solve these things. Crawl, walk, run.
We could go on and on, Mark.
We
This is
could, yeah.
fascinating stuff. You're a fascinating guy, obviously.
Thanks.
At the end of the day, again, there's still, we are still humans. We're still involved in these things. When you're not that, maybe there's not that much time in your life that you're not thinking about all of these things and diving into them. But we're a community here in the Best Practices podcast and the Leadtail network. What do you do when you're not solving these problems? Is there something you'd share with the community about, something you find, particularly fun or inspiring that you'd like to share?
I outside of this, I'm a very uninteresting person, I think. I enjoy working hard, and then, I work hard. I work long hours and I work very hard, and it is the downtime is to hang with my family and our dogs. There's a few things that I make time for in my day intentionally. It's driving my kids to school. I want to show them that that's an important aspect of life. The other is we have two dogs, a German Shepherd and a Malinois, to take them out to go play each evening. And, then, I like to cook. And so I enjoy, making stuff for my family. But it's a wonderful thing when you have the thing that you do is the thing that you love at a secondary or tertiary level, right? God, family, work. And it's that tertiary level where, like, I get to wake up in the morning and say, holy cow, I'm going to go do this. I'm excited to try that. I'm going to do something new.
That is, I think, a great point of view for whatever you're undertaking in your life, and a
Right.
little bit of a check to see if what you're working on and what you're putting your hours into is the best use of your time on this planet, right?
Yeah.
Well, we're really lucky that you're working on all of this, Mark, and we really appreciate you taking time out to
Thank
talk
you,
to
Clark.
us and to share your
Yeah.
thoughts and advice and your view on where this is all going. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for these insights. We really appreciate it. It's been great to have you here.
It's my pleasure completely. Thanks, Clark.
Thank you. Take care.